Hello, everyone. Um, Following up on our top 20 moms from pop culture, we figured it's Father's Day, so let's talk about 20 dads from pop culture. Surprisingly, finding dads is way harder than moms. I don't know what that says about like our sort of social commentary on fatherhood, but we did find 20. They are kind of all over the place, and so we're going to go through them, talk about them, and make sure. I'm sure you'll let us know if we forgot someone obvious. But all right, so Sir Chonk's going to start us off with the dad from, well, the man from the road.
All right, so I hate the book The Road, just so you're aware. And it's
Just died. Be
basically,
nice about it.
look, I didn't say I hate Cormac McCarthy. I just think that book sucks. But you got to give it to that man. He didn't go out to the convenience store and go out for milk and cigarettes and never return. No, he just kept finding holes in the ground with milk and cigarettes, or the survival era equivalent, and sharing him with his dopey son. Whether it be protecting him from marauders or splitting a can of Coke, he was a loyal father who specifically didn't have that much road to walk on, I guess. Mostly just like fields and stuff. But anyway, he was willing to die for his son, and you should be willing to die instead of reading that book.
Great. All right, so the next one is actually kind of a little weird. I don't want to ruin the ending, but it's the father from After Sun, and it's a very sad movie and a very tragic story. But part of what I think just is really interesting about the father in this story is how much he's like hiding kind of what he's going through to make sure his daughter is having a sort of fun vacation. And we see kind of how like he's struggling a lot with his depression and his own issues, but it's only as an adult, like, which is basically the theme of the film, it's only as an adult that his daughter realizes kind of that he wasn't, fully in a good place, essentially, when they were on this vacation. But at the time she couldn't tell, and I think that just says a lot about being willing to sort of sacrifice and kind of make sure that your children are happy and things are going well for them, even at putting like your own sort of baggage, I guess, aside. So I'm going to move on back to Sir Chonk.
So I get stuck with The Road, which I hate, and you get After Sun, which I love. Unfair. But at least I get To Kill a Mockingbird and Atticus Finch. I believe AFI ranked him as like the number one, or like at least in the top 5 heroes of all time. And he's quite heroic, but he's also a pretty good dad. He's always kneeling down next to kids and giving them fatherly advice, and then he's shooting rabid dogs in the street. Things that any father would do. So yeah, pretty consistently true to his sort of, I guess, morals and way of thinking. So yeah, one of those sort of like, I feel like he'd make a good 1950s sitcom dad. I mean, maybe not for the shooting of the dog, but the rest of it, definitely.
All right, so I'm going with the dad from the short story The Rocket Man by Ray Bradbury, which is kind of funny because he's pretty much an absent father. But part of the story is that he's aware of how much it's taking out of his family to do his job. And so, when he promises his son, okay, this is going to be my last trip in space.
He was right.
Okay, spoiler. But like he obviously does want to be there for his kid. He doesn't want he's always telling his son like don't follow this path. Don't end up in like the same situation. He's kind of, essentially the sort of like traveling salesman of the 50s, but like set in space. I feel like Bradbury was maybe making some comments about like a lot of the dads are constantly busy traveling for work and putting all their time into work. And it's funny because I recently saw a thing and it was somebody posted something on like LinkedIn or something, but it was like the only people who are going to remember how hard you worked and how many things you missed are your kids, not your boss. And so it's kind of like he's working, but he's essentially is not around. But like he promises his son, like this will be my last trip. I'm gonna find a way to settle down. I need to make an income, but I also don't want to give up being with my family. And so, it's kind of sad, but I also think, like he recognizes that, and it's a really great story anyway. So, all right, so I'm gonna move back to Sir Chonk for the dad from Family Ties. I can't remember his name.
So that Bradbury story, along with it being graduation, reminds me of the classic quote, "Shoot for the moon, because even if you miss, you'll land among the stars. And then, of course, you'll suffocate and or explode in the freezing, cold heartlessness of space."
Not for the sun.
What?
That's the one where he goes to the sun.
No, I know that. No, he burns into a star. He burns into the atmosphere. He doesn't turn to the sun.
He hits.
She doesn't even know what she's talking about.
He has no idea what he's talking about. It was on the wrong story. He's talking about the two guys floating in space. It's not the same damn story.
Oh, wait, what's that one? That one's really good. What's that one called?
I don't remember, but we're talking about a different story.
Oh, the Rocket Man. Oh, that one's not as good. You picked the wrong story. Anyway, what the hell am I talking about? Oh, yeah.
Keaton.
What the heck is that dude's name?
Steven?
Steven Grossman's the actor, isn't it?
I don't know. We'll look it up before we actually put them on.
Anyway, the guy from Family Ties, who's, again, sort of your generic 80s sitcom guy, but he's also kind of a snark, and I respect that. Whether he's saying you Ushnu to towel off after you Zoquo, it doesn't really matter. The key is he's quite the sort of, I don't want to say foil. Yeah, I guess I'd say foil for Alex P. Keaton's extremely sort of Republican-based theories. Makes for a fun, surprisingly, I guess nowadays it's pretty common for sitcom dads to be like satirical and just like cranky and angry and witty, but he sort of like was one of the earlier ones, at least in my experience, where he was just like giving his kids like crap, which I respect.
All right, so I'm going on to the dad from 8th grade. And I love how a lot of these are just the dad. Like, I feel like, if they have a name on, like, IMDb, it probably tells you, but, like, no one thinks of them as they're just the dad. But I think it must be really tough to be a dad, especially a single dad, with a girl at that age. Because especially, like, obviously, it's hard on a girl that age to not have a mom to necessarily talk to about, like, being a girl and growing up and going all through all those, like, girl adolescent things. But, I think he does a really good job of trying to kind of cover for that. And obviously she's kind of in that period in her life where she's, growing up, but also, so she, like, doesn't want anything to do with her dad, but also, like, kind of does. And so they have a really, I think, realistic, but also, like, emotional relationship where, there's a lot of times where she's like, oh, dad, just leave me alone. But then we also see, like, he continues to try and, to be there for her no matter what. And, so it's an emotional, that's also a great movie. Yeah. So Chunk's going to tell you about Dre from Blackish.
Gucci. So yeah, I get all the sitcom dads, I guess. I like Dre for his sort of versatility, right? They show him, like, doing a lot of business stuff. They show his personal side with all the things he enjoys doing. They show him with his wife hanging out, being I don't know if he's the best husband, but he gives it a good shot. And then they show him with his kids, right? He's a very nice, realistic character who's well-balanced, shows you how busy he is, but he still manages to make time to do his best at all the stuff he has to do. And he's got a good sort of, like, winning personality. He clearly cares about everybody, even though he's not always the best at doing everything right. But, of course, he's a sitcom dad. He's not supposed to be good at doing everything right. That wouldn't be any fun.
All right, so now we're going to move on to a very different kind of dad, and this is Liam Neeson from Taken. He has a very particular set of skills, and those skills are,
travel. If
you mess with his kid, he will follow you to the ends of the earth and kill you.
I will find you, and I will eat your sushi.
So, the thing is, like, you can't really fault a dad that's literally like, oh, what? You're going to mess with my daughter? I will track you down to wherever you are on this planet, and I will torture you and kill you to make sure my daughter is safe.
Isn't this daughter also Alicia Cuthbert?
Yeah.
Who's the same daughter from 24, where Jack Bauer then spends like the whole season chasing down. Man, if you kidnap a daughter, do not kidnap Alicia Cuthbert.
But yeah, so obviously, that's a pretty potent thing. I mean, I don't think he's as realistic as some of the dads we've talked about because it just, obviously it's an action movie. But I think that's another side of the dad. And speaking of another side of a dad, we're going to hear about John Connor. Wait, John Connor or whatever the dad's name is.
You mean John Connor's dad?
Yeah, John Connor's dad.
Reese, you're talking about. Right, okay. I'm like, John Connor ain't got no damn kids. I mean, he probably does, but I forget. Yeah, so Reese, played by one of my favorite non-star action guys, Michael Biehn. He goes back in time to save a dude that he doesn't even know is his kid yet. So you gotta appreciate that. But action dude, sacrifices himself, got a cool name, shows up in Aliens, shows up in Navy SEALs. Now, sure, it's not the same character, but I don't care, because that guy's awesome. Shows up in The Rock. So he's a very busy dad. He's in The Rock. Yeah.
Apparently we're turning into a Michael Biehn.
Michael Biehn is a great dad. That's what I'm here to say. Screw Reese. Michael Biehn, Dad of the Year.
I'm sure his kids will agree if he has them.
We should hope. I don't know. Maybe he's got kids.
All right, so moving on. Back to, the sitcoms. I'm going to talk about Dad Brady. I forget his name. I forget everyone's name right now, so don't forget. I mean, when we get all this stuff put together,
Mr. Brady?
Yeah, Mr. Brady. I know he has an actual name. But...
How is it, Michael?
Mike Brady, yes.
Brady.
So... the reason I think he's, interesting, obviously he's your typical sitcom dad, but what's kind of, at the time, it was, so unique that we had this, sort of blended family. That was not, now it's oh, who cares? There's a blended family. But that was, unheard of when they were making that show. And it was just interesting to kind of see, okay, so he's raising his kids, but he's also raising... these stepkids, and that was just again, totally new and alien at that time. And he raises them like his own, and he's a good dad, and he's doing all the sort of sitcom-y dad things, but, it's also it was pretty iconic, for it to be able to be this sort of new dad, essentially, this new model of father.
I went to the Grand Canyon one time with a bunch of people, and we just walked around yelling, Bobby! Cindy! And probably you guys don't get that joke, but trust me, it's freaking hilarious if you watch the Brady Bunch.
Okay, so Sir Chonk's not going to talk about Easy A.
Ah, yes, Easy A. Stanley Tucci is the papa in this one. And what I like about this guy is that he sort of just, again... he just dumps on all of his kids, right? He's like, oh, yeah, he's just very humorous. He's another example of one of those dads that, clearly he cares, whatever. But he's also very humorous in the way that he cares. He tries to stay in touch with his kids' lives as much as he can without also being intrusive and getting in the way. And he enjoys offensive words spelled out using P's.
All right, so I'm going to talk about Father of the Bride, and, I mean, technically... this movie's been made a million times. I'm going to talk about the one with Steve Martin because I just think that's the best version. But essentially, I mean, this is pretty much this is your stereotypical dad. I mean, middle class or even upper middle class, I guess white suburban dad. So he's not, I guess he's not interesting in that way, but it's also I think it's such an iconic, moment for a lot of people, when they get married and to have their father, be there for their wedding. And, he's kind of, uncomfortable realizing, his daughter is going to go off and, be with somebody else. And, there's all the, costs of the wedding. And, he doesn't like seeing his daughter growing up. And, I mean, I know it's kind of cliche, but I also think Steve Martin does such a good job of, kind of playing the frazzled and irritated, but also sentimental and caring father. So, I mean, Father of the Bride is it's a great movie, and the Steve Martin version is just fantastic. And now we're going to take a completely different turn with the father and daughter to Silent Hill.
Ah, yes. Much like Father of the Bride in Silent Hill, you have a father simply looking for what's in the best interest of his daughter. What is she going to have for a cake? Where's the venue going to be? Is her soul going to be ripped apart and devoured by demons? What are you going to have in your standard wedding? We don't have a wedding yet in Silent Hill because his daughter's like 8 or whatever. But again, if you appear in Silent Hill and you see how messed up that town is, and you're like, well, I guess I gotta go in here because my daughter's in here, I'd probably be like, I don't think I care that much about my daughter. I'm out. But this dude, Harry? Is it Harry? I forget.
I think it's Harry Mason.
Harry Mason. He's like, I'm gonna kill all these twisted nurses and all these weird dudes with like a crowbar as I'm jumping through hellscapes because I got to save my daughter. And quite frankly, the daughter probably isn't appreciative. You know, she's all like, oh, sure, Dad, but where's my iPhone? You know, daughters be like that.
All right. So I'm going to talk about the dad from Glee, Kurt's dad, because, I mean, again, this is not really groundbreaking. You know, it shouldn't be. But, you know, he was sort of like your blue-collar, typical kind of like blue-collar dad. And, you know, here's his son who's joining the Glee Club, obviously not athletic. And then, like, you know, he walks in on his son practicing, like, the single ladies dance, and, you know, I feel like it was kind of obvious, like, you know, his son was gay, but he, you know, Kurt was really nervous about telling his dad, and then when he tells him, of course, his dad's like, obviously, I mean, you know, but, you know, I know it's kind of a stereotypical thing, but, you know, it was one of the first times I think you saw on TV kind of this relationship, and it's such a good relationship because, you know, obviously his father, like, you know, it's new to him. It's a new world to him, but he's totally willing to embrace it. He's supportive of his his child. And, you know, that's obviously what you want to do. You know, if your kid comes out to you, you want to be like, okay, I'm 100% behind you. I mean, it's your kid. So, you know, I think he's just he's a good father in that way because, and again, this was sort of groundbreaking at the time, and now it's been over 10 years, and it's sort of like, it's not really groundbreaking anymore, and it shouldn't be, but at the time, it was still something you didn't see very often. Also on TV, we got Rick Grimes.
Rick Grimes. Sure, a decent enough dad, but what about that hat? Yeah. He had a cool hat that he gave to his son. So that tells you all you need to know. Terrible wife. I think his wife's one of the dumbest characters in TV.
Also, we have the comic version.
Yeah. Well, she's terrible in both versions. She's worse in TV, though. Thank goodness she died. That was great. But Rick Grimes, like, I don't care how many people die. I'm going to soldier on. Sure, he lets his baby daughter get devoured by zombies in the comic. Spoiler. You know, but of course the TV, it doesn't have the guts, so it keeps her alive, even though she should have gotten eaten. So is he really? I guess maybe he's not that great of a dad when he's like letting his baby daughter get eaten by zombies. But Carl turns into an absolute sociopathic murder machine in the comics. He's great, and that's good parenting when your son loses all sense of emotion and just turns into a pure psychopathic murderer. Love it. On the show, unfortunately, he's kind of a pudding-eating punk who's not nearly as interesting, but he does still get the hat. So I guess Rick Grimes, in retrospect, kind of a crap father, but cool, though. Remember that time they had that zombie head, and they wanted to make him look like somebody else, so they just randomly broke his nose by punching a dead head? That was hilarious.
Is that in the show?
Yeah.
The show's just not... I'm sorry. I know a lot of people love the show, but, like, read the comics. They're so much better.
The show.
I skip parts of the show.
You watched like 3 total episodes.
No, I watched like 3 seasons, but what they did to Andrea, it just unforgivable.
You can't listen to her. She just fabricates what she watched. She watched like maybe 2 total hours of this show. Look, the show's kind of crap. I agree with that part. But
all they do is walk in this season.
No, I didn't fast forward. I watched every damn episode, even though that show is not good. But she's lying. She didn't see hardly any of it.
I saw it, but I got upset about Andrea, and then I gave up.
That was like season 8. You saw like 1 episode.
He's making things up.
Oh my god.
Anyway, by the way, Robert Kirkman admits that the biggest mistake he made in writing the comics was what he did to Andrea in the comics, and that's when I stopped reading them.
Yeah, he was just like, I want to kill off a main character. I'm just going to pick Andrea. And she dies in like this really stupid fashion. And you're kind of like, why did you do that? And then the whole comic kind of fell apart.
Yeah, and then it wasn't good anymore. That's why I stopped reading that comic.
Honestly, after like the whole Negan War, the whole comic sort of fell apart.
No, it was good. And then they killed Andrea for no reason.
Crap after that.
Spoilers. Anyway, next one is the dad from Searching. And what I like about him is he's just like this, he's a regular dude, right? And like trying to find his daughter who's missing. So he's searching for her. Also, I mean, this movie's great, by the way. Totally cool, like, use of using, like, social media and just a computer screen and kind of how you build a story so effectively with, like, just basically a guy on a screen. Great. But I think it's so interesting because, again, he's just a regular guy with regular tools at his disposal. He's not Liam Neeson from Taken, He doesn't have a particular set of skills. His skills are
Google.
Check Facebook and Google. Like, I mean, and so, but I think that's a great, also, like, for all the action stars who are going to hunt you to the ends of the earth, you also have the dad who's, like, really good at, like, using the resources in front of him. But again, stopping at nothing to save their kid. All right. Let's talk about Hans from The Book Thief.
Oh, Hans. Yeah, she hasn't seen Walking Dead, by the way. Anyway, The Book Thief, if you haven't read that, spectacular, really good book. And the dad is one of those dads that...
Well, it's like, he's adopted, right? He's her adoptive father?
I think so. Yeah. Anyway, so he adopts a sock girl. I forget her real name. Liesel. Anyway... She's cool too, but he is one of those dads that like seems to pop up in these World War II epics, where he's like talented in certain ways, and he uses whatever his talent is to sort of show like the goodness in the world, despite all of the poop salad. Right? You see it in Book Thief. You see it. And, actually, I don't want to spoil it because you're going to get to that one in a minute, so I'll hold that one. You see it a little bit in the light you cannot see, which I just started reading. He's got sort of like the ability to connect to various people. He knows how to utilize what he's able to use, and he's what's the word I want? Self-sacrifice? Is that the word? What's the word for like self-sacrificey kind of dude? But
self-sacrificing.
Anyway, he's willing to do whatever it takes to help his kid and the people around him that he cares about. Yeah.
He also teaches her to read, and that's a great trait. I mean, obviously that's not that important, being that it's like in World War II, but it is because that's how she becomes the book thief.
Readings for nerds.
Yeah. Okay.
Nerds.
So to another book, Jodi Picoult's The 10th Circle. And so the father in this is a comic book artist, and so that's why I like this picture of this like Wolverine character. He is not. He is just a guy who's a comic book artist. But his daughter is sexually assaulted, and so she's going through some trauma, and she's kind of like dealing with this. And her father essentially finds out what's going on, and there's a very realistic, like, obviously he wants this guy killed. But he can't. I mean, he's a regular guy. You can't just go murdering people, in real life books. But the events of the story, and I don't want to ruin this because I'm sure this is not like a super common thing. It's not like people have been exposed to, the 10th Circle on a regular basis. So I feel like I don't want to really ruin anything. But I think if you've read this, like the dad is just great. And if you haven't read it, you should go read it because it's a really good book. So we're down to our last two, and these two are basically like, I feel like we kind of were like, okay, we know these two are going to be on the list, and then we were like, okay, we got to come up with some dads, and it was, we had to do some deep diving here, you can tell, but this is in our number 2 spot, so Chonk's going to tell you about, technically not a father, but a father figure who is amazing, and the new show was amazing.
Oh, right. That's a long introduction. By the way, the 10th Circle, the 7th Circle, clearly the best. A great father not included in our list, the Darth father, Darth Vader. What a great dad he was.
What?
You don't like Darth Vader?
Also, we didn't want to use anything we used for moms.
I mean, sure, he did a little bit of murder, but whatever. But anyway, I'm talking about Joel from The Last of Us, who, much like Rip Grimes, let his daughter get murdered. But then he acquired a new daughter, kind of, sort of, and he learned from his previous errors, and he was like, I'm going to go on my way to not let her get murdered. And he does all kinds of cool things. He teaches her the guitar, which ends up leading to some really intense scenes later on. He teaches her how to murder the crap out of things, how to survive, how to just generally be pretty awesome, and again, goes out of his way to do anything that he can to ensure the survival of his not daughter, but kind of daughter once he's failed the first daughter who gets shot. But still, Joel's awesome, Ellie's awesome, Last of Us is awesome. If you've seen the show and you haven't played the game, you got to play both games. They're unfreaking believable. Maybe the two best games of all time.
Okay, and so for our
Darth Vader #1.
Yeah, so again, what we wanted to do, like the reason we don't have Ned Stark and stuff on here is we didn't want to use the same media that we were using for Moms, because we wanted to be like, we don't want to just be like, hey, we watch Game of Thrones. Like, we've done other things in our lives, so.
Two other things.
I mean, Game of Thrones could just fill every list ever, but we're not going to do that. So the #1 is the dad from Life is Beautiful. And this movie, if you haven't seen this movie, you need to see this movie. And honestly, just suck it up and watch it in subtitles. You'll get used to it. I mean, he won Best Actor. Like, no matter who is doing a dubbed version, it's just not gonna work the same. So definitely, like, try to suck it up and see it with the subtitles. But this is such an interesting movie because, early on in the movie, like, the dad he's a putz. Like, before he gets married, before he has the kid, he's
not a putz.
He's just goofy. He's goofy, he's playful, he's a weirdo. Like, and he's just fun. Like, he has, like, these fun, cute dates with his wife. So this movie is going to, like, mess with your head really bad. Because the first half is really cute. It's this love story. He's got this girl he loves. He has this son. They're just wacky. He gets into all these wacky antics. But meanwhile, what's happening is he's a store owner, and they're Jewish, right?
Yes.
I didn't even know if they were Jewish. I just kind of realized. But it's during World War II, and so as the Nazis, the fascists in this case, because it's in Italy, but as the fascists are coming into power and obviously joining with the Nazis, you start seeing all these sort of like external things happening, and his son's kind of asking like, why does it say no Jews at this store? And, he's like, oh, people are ridiculous. Like, no, we're going to say no Visigoths and no spiders in our store. And so he kind of is like, as the world's getting darker and darker, he's trying to keep it light. And then the movie, about halfway through, they are taken to a concentration camp. And it goes from being like cute and fun to being like, oh, this is kind of dark. But what the dad does in this movie is essentially convince his son that this concentration camp is a game. That they're trying to win points to win a tank. And I mean, you could kind of like, I know some people are like, oh, they're like making light of the Holocaust. But instead, I think it's about like just how much you're willing to do to make sure that like your child doesn't have to like deal with the trauma of, like the world, and so he's trying to keep his son to like have beauty in his life and have these good things in his life, even while they're in literally the most horrific situation you can be in. And so you go from like laughing and just thinking this movie is hilarious, and then by the end you're hysterically crying. It's amazing. And it really does live up to the title though, because like, I mean, it's hard to be like, oh, Life is Beautiful, but that's what's so amazing about it, is it's both like heartbreaking and awful, but also like really uplifting in a weird way, because you realize just like how much he did for his son. And
he wins a tank.
Yeah, spoiler, but I mean, yeah, it's so uplifting, but also like it'll destroy you. So if you like movies that make you laugh and cry, but literally like to the degree that you're just like, oh. But we walked out of this movie and we're just like, Okay, that was like the best movie ever, and it's still there on like our best movies. And every time I see it, I still cry, and I still can't like believe how good it is. Sir Chonk, do you have anything to say about this movie?
Movie good. Watch.
Okay. All right. So happy Father's Day. Did we forget anybody? Is there anybody you can think of? Okay, Darth Vader's not a good dad. I mean, I guess technically we could make the argument that he is, because
son.
in the end he chooses his son over
Spoilers.
the. Okay, you know what? If you don't know the ending of Star Wars by now, too bad. It's been like 1,000 years.
Jango Fett, good dad.
I said we weren't using Star Wars because we used Amidala. Anyway, Darth Vader, I mean, we could have made that argument, but
Cookie Monster. Yep. Could be a good dad.
We were going to use Toothless from How to Train Your Dragon, but really he's only like a dad at like the absolute end, and then in like some of the specials. But really, because we're just trying to find a way to talk about how cute Toothless is.
Yeah, he mostly just like shoves his kid out of the way as he's like trying to get like some fish or something.
Yeah, but he's pretty awesome. Maybe we'll do a video on just how great Toothless is, or we'll do a video about dragons and the best dragons in pop culture for our Dragon Day. I don't know when that is. I'm sure there's
Darth Vader.
I bet there's a Dragon Day. Maybe we could do a best pirates for Pirate Day.
Yar.
Anyway, happy Father's Day. This is nonsense. Bye.
Boop.